Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back to my channel, Anastasia Cosmic Astrologer. Okay, today I want to just spend a short while talking about Saturn transits, and more specifically, what I'm going to just briefly touch on is when you have transiting Saturn forming a square to your Sun, Mercury, or Venus, and we can even touch on Saturn square the Moon as well. I was kind of inspired to do this video today based on a Facebook friend, I guess you could say, who's actually experiencing Saturn squaring his natal Mercury and Venus at the moment, and just the comments that were posted in relation to that. So this is for him, for you, and anybody else who may be experiencing heavy Saturn transits at the moment. Okay, so just a few things before we start to examine or delineate what Saturn essentially brings up when you have it in the square aspect to Sun, Mercury, Moon, or Venus. So first of all, let's just recap on a couple of things, and that is that, well, first of all, what does Saturn actually mean? You know, what does he bring to life and to our chart essentially? So in my experience and in all the years I've been doing astrology, through reading people's charts, through teaching astrology, and just through working through some pretty hardcore issues myself in my own life through Saturn, I can say that Saturn, unfortunately, is a very, very, very difficult energy. Even though it's an energy that relates to this 3D experience, this 3D reality, this third dimensional physical reality, which is essentially connected to all the structures that we see on every single level. The word structure is the word that strongly correlates to Saturn's energy. Saturn produces structure and form. So we live in a world of form because we live in the world of the physical, okay? So all systems, all structures, all rules, all norms, particularly all the ones that are associated with what we generally experience as limitation, okay? We experience as feeling blocked or inhibited, or very strongly challenged from the point of view of feeling an external force coming at us, kind of blocking us, as it were, or making us feel limited, as it were. I mean, look, let me be clear. No one can actually make us feel anything, but certainly when we are experiencing certain transits, we are subject to the archetypal influences and energies that those particular planets in their signs, in whatever sign they are in, we are subject to those archetypal energies and influences. And it's going to depend on a number of different things in terms of how a particular transit does influence you, okay? So yes, there is a general, I suppose you could say, way of delineating a particular planet in terms of where it's transiting in your chart, or what it's aspecting in your chart. So what relationship is it forming to another planet in your chart? But in terms of how that's going to specifically affect you, it's always going to come down to a number of different things, such as age, gender, cultural background, beliefs, level of awareness and consciousness, which is I think the biggest thing. And what stage are you at in life? What's going on in life for you at the moment? You may be facing a number of different challenges, because it's very typical when we're going through a really massive transitional stage in life where there's a lot of things sort of feeling like it's slipping out of our control, you know, where things are perhaps ending or, you know, adjusting in very big ways. It's making us very, very uncomfortable. It's usually a number of different things that are being hit off, you know, triggered in your birth chart. So anyway, I'm just going to try and keep it simple for today, because I just want you guys to be aware, if at the moment, because I'm talking about Saturn at the moment, and you know, Saturn is, it really is a hard energy, okay? There's, you know, there's no way of making Saturn light. And you know, passionate and optimistic. It's just not the nature of Saturn. So we have to be realistic with what Saturn represents and therefore what it produces. I mean, you know, on a positive level, yes, certainly once we go through the transit, if we have been able to allow Saturn to deconstruct those areas of our life that need to be deconstructed, and if we are really authentic and true to ourselves, and we have, you know, a fair bit of love and support around us as well, we, you know, we can come out at the end of the transit seeing a much more positive outlook in terms of, you know, perhaps what we've been able to achieve. But none of it is, it's going to be a hard slog, to put it quite simply. It's not going to come easy. It never does, not with Saturn. Okay, so look, if for example, for all you Librans out there, and for all you Aries out there, now when I say Librans and Aries right now, in terms of the month of March in 2018, you'd have to have the sun, your sun, Mercury, a moon or Venus within the first 10 degrees of Libra or Aries, okay? Which, if you do, what you will be experiencing this year is Saturn squaring either your sun, your moon, Mercury, or Venus. If you have any of those planets in the early degrees of Libra or Aries, this is what you're going to experience. Now, there would be loads of people who have this configuration, okay? Because there's loads of Librans, there's loads of Aries, and etc. Okay? Now, Saturn, as I said, you know, it's what represents the reality that we have essentially constructed ourselves, okay? And even though Saturn transits generally and typically present as an external force coming at us, which is forcing us to change, forcing us to let go, deconstruct and things. Nothing's actually forcing us, but that's what it feels like, okay? So when I'm using the word an external force forcing us to do anything, there isn't an external force forcing us to do anything, okay? It's actually a part of our consciousness and what we have constructed as our reality that gets adjusted, changed, challenged, and so forth. So, look, Saturn transits are really, 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 really challenging, whichever way you look at it. Doesn't matter how optimistic you are. You could be a triple Sagittarius, and you can be, and that might actually be even more difficult for you if you're a triple Sag, or even if you're a Sag, because, you know, the nature of Sag is to feel optimistic, happy, adventurous, excited, you know, boundless energy, and you get a Saturn transit and all that stuff feels like it's gone out the window. You know, you feel blocked. That's what Saturn does. It's a block. So, but like I said, it is connected to the reality that we have constructed ourselves, And if we can understand that, there is some sense of liberation that can come through that awareness and that understanding, because we can start to, as hard as it is, try and turn within and understand what we have actually created in our reality, and therefore what is it that's been projected out there that now is being questioned or challenged. And it's always about coming back to a more true and authentic you. You know, that's what Saturn transits at the most positive optimum level essentially mean. Okay, but you know, they're certainly not experienced like that to begin with, at least anyway. So look, if yeah, so a Saturn transit almost always triggers things. I can't recall seeing a chart where I looked at somebody's chart and did a reading for them, or even in my own life, where Saturn was squaring, particularly squares and oppositions and conjunctions as well. Those three aspects are really powerful, really potent aspects. So if you have any of those three aspects with Saturn in connection to particularly the personal inner planets, well, you could say the angles as well. So, you know, there's a lot, okay, but let me just bring it right back again, because I'll get too distracted, and I really just wanted to stick today to Saturn squaring your Sun, your Moon, Mercury, or Venus, okay? So, as I said, if you are a Libran or an Aries, this year for you, you will experience Saturn squaring your Sun, if you're a Sun sign Libra, or if you have your Moon in Libra, or if you have Venus in Libra, or Mercury in Libra. And the same goes with Aries. If you have Sun in Aries, Moon in Aries, Mercury in Aries, Venus in Aries, okay? Now, you need to be born with any of those planets being at the very early degrees of Libra or Aries, so the first 10 degrees, which means you would have been born early when that sign begins, as opposed to later, because it's the first 10 degrees. And if you are born with, you know, any of those planets in the sign of Libra and or Aries in the later degrees of Aries or Libra, well, then you're not going to experience this Saturn squaring transit until next year, okay? But look, this is something that you can message me if you like, send me an email or write a message underneath this video if you want some clarification about whether you have you know, Saturn squaring any of your Aries planets or your Libra planets. If you're not able to figure that out yourself, I'm happy to let you know if that is the case. All right. You can also link on the Facebook, my Facebook professional astrology page that I've got, and you can just send me a message through there as well. Okay. And of course, if you're interested in having a full reading, obviously this is what I'm here for as well. Okay, so now Saturn, apart from the things that I have mentioned already, a heavy dose of Saturn, I like to use that analogy or that expression rather, because Saturn does feel like a heavy dose. It's pretty heavy when it comes around and it comes into your life, and it's affecting the Sun, Mercury, Moon, or Venus in your chart. And the typical things that it brings with it are things like depression, lack of energy, lack of motivation, lack of enthusiasm, feeling disconnected, feeling isolated, feeling alienated, not feeling understood, not feeling like you're connecting or connected. It's a really, really, really challenging energy. So sadness, emotional and physical loss or pain can occur during a Saturn transit. These are, I'm not saying that every single person that has a Saturn transit is going to experience all these things, but all these things are most certainly possible, and even more than possible. Okay, so just keep an open mind, I guess. All right, now if you have Saturn, and I'm just talking about the square aspect today, okay? There's lots of aspects, but I'm just talking about the square today. Square is a very, very dynamic, challenging aspect, often experienced internally and within, but naturally whatever we experience internally will ultimately be projected out there, okay? But it's the energy starts within. It's an internal dynamic tension that goes on within you, okay? That's what a square aspect does. So when Saturn is squaring your Sun for a year, you will vitality will be affected. So, you know, what is the Sun? The Sun is vitality. It's apart from your personality and your self-expression and how you present who you are on that personality level, it's your solar energy. So it's the Sun central core energy within you that gives you that sense of feeling alive. That's what the Sun does. So it brings Saturn in. Saturn is cold and wet. The Sun is warm and not wet, dry. It's heat. So when you bring Saturn close to the Sun, Saturn cools off the Sun's energy, okay? Saturn can have a very strong effect on the solar energy, which makes us, it's kind of like a cloud has come over us. And it's a grey cloud. Saturn rules clouds, I've said that before. It's a grey cloud which feels heavy and dark. There's not a lot of light, so it feels like part of our light has dimmed down. Solar energy, solar light, Sun. Your Sun sign is your light. Saturn comes in, dims that down, takes away, to a degree, a lot of your solar core energy. At least this is what it feels like. Being able to express yourself is a lot more challenging. When whatever is going on in your life, and particularly if you're trying to create things in your life, that creative energy and purpose is thwarted at this time. There's a sense of limitations and restrictions. There's a sense of feeling inhibited, not feeling your confidence is strongly affected during this time. So that normal sense of confidence that you may have as a person that you are takes a bit of a backseat. You know, that natural sense of solar energy is not the same, okay, with the Saturn transit. Now that all sounds pretty shitty, doesn't it? Because it actually is shitty. I'm not going to gloss it over and make it something, you know, idealistic and unrealistic. This is Saturn squaring the Sun. This is what it is, okay? So if you can understand that this is the potential energy, archetypal energy that can come through, you can at least have the awareness and the insight that, okay, this is a Saturn transit that I'm having this year, so I'm likely to experience, you know, all these things that I've just described to you. So it kind of, it lets you know to remind yourself that it will definitely pass. You know, you will get through it, hopefully. Most people do. But it is going to be an incredibly testing, challenging time. Now, when you've got Saturn squaring your Sun, what you're also bringing into the mix is 7 years ago. What happened in your life 7 years ago? In that, what were you starting? What were you beginning during that time? Because whatever you begun at that time in your life, through the Sun's solar creative energy, is basically being tested right now. That's what's actually happening. So whatever is invalid and is not working is going to crumble, okay, with Saturn squaring the Sun, all right? And whilst that feels devastating and it feels like a very heavy loss, and it's really hard to let go, so, you know, we bring up resistance. That's another very good word when we've got Saturn square the Sun. There's this internal sense of resistance to what's actually appearing. But the more resistance you actually bring up, the more painful and more challenging this transit's going to be. So I would suggest that you try and let go of the resistance and somehow trying to find a way to allow yourself to see what is being asked for you to actually look at and re-examine and deconstruct. Because if you can do that, it won't be as painful, you could say. Okay. So, any ambitions that you normally would feel, and perhaps the ambitions that you started with 7 years ago, you don't feel those ambitions at the moment. You won't. It's really, really hard. They'll be thwarted, basically. So just be mindful of that. I mean, this transit can make, you know, it can really make one feel really disheartened. You know, it's tough. Look, also when we're having, you know, significant Saturn transit, another issue that is quite typical is challenges with authority figures. So could be in your workplace, could be challenges with your father if it's a Saturn square the Sun. You know, the Sun is always the father in your chart, and Saturn is always authoritative figures. So, you know, that can come into the mix as well. So don't be surprised if you experience conflict and tension with people who present as authority figures in whichever form that may be. There'll be a resistance on your part to be able to communicate as you really want to, you know, with authority figures, because essentially the way it's going to feel for you is you will feel blocked. You will feel like, you know, you're being sort of pushed on the side. You won't feel appreciated. You won't feel understood. Yeah, it's a pretty hardcore transit. It's not pleasant, okay? But as I said, you know, if you can find a way to recognize what needs to deconstruct, which is part of the reality in your consciousness that you have constructed, as you move through the transit and the light starts to shine again, you will be able to see and recognize what really needed to actually deconstruct and leave your life, as it were. Okay, so that's Saturn on the Sun, and you know, look, health needs to be really prioritized in your life when you're having a Saturn square the Sun transit, because you know the Sun is vitality, so therefore it's your health as well. And it can be pretty typical when Saturn is squaring the Sun for someone to experience low vitality. So, you know, immune system can be compromised, energies are quite low, you know, motivation, inspiration, those things take a back seat. So it can feel quite drained as well, okay? So just be aware of that. And, you know, if you can top up on really healthy eating and drinking, you know, and obviously some exercise, and you know, you may just need, I'm into, you know, various types of vitamins and things like that, and I think they can be very, very useful, especially, you know, if you're feeling depressed. We're talking about neurotransmitter stuff. So vitamin B6 is really, really, really powerful to get those neurotransmitters activated again in order to bring up the feel-good sort of endorphins in your brain again, because something does happen to the neurotransmitters when we feel depressed, and Saturn is always about depression, so just keep that in mind as well. That can be very useful. I have actually been through depression various times in my life and know what that feels like. Not clinical depression and you know, for long periods of time, but doses of it here and there, which has been pretty intense. So I know what that feels like, and I definitely know vitamin B6 works, okay? So just want to put it out there. You can research that, explore it yourself. Okay, moving on to, if you had Saturn squaring the Moon, I forgot to make a couple of notes on that, but it doesn't matter because I actually Know exactly what that means. Don't need any note prompting. Look, Moon square Saturn is, I don't know if it's more difficult than Sun square Saturn, but it's really, really, really tough emotionally, because we're talking about the world of emotions. We're talking about the world of security. The Moon is our unconscious security, just as is Pluto, but just on a different level with Pluto. So the Moon is quite a vulnerable, volatile, soft energy, and you can see that just by looking at the Moon doing its orbit in 1 month. The various cycles that it goes through from new moon to full moon back to new moon. It has 8 very distinct phases that it goes through, each phase symbolizing something very, very unique and specific. But essentially the Moon is a fluctuating energy. That's what I'm trying to say. So it's not a fixed energy, it's fluctuating, it's soft, it's changeable, which describes moods, doesn't it? The word moods comes from the word moon. Hence, Cancerians, sometimes you can see that they have what's called a moon face. So people who are sun sign Cancers, and sometimes even Cancer ascendant, have a moon face, because they're ruled by the moon, so they have that lunar face. Anyway, it's going off track a bit. Moon square Saturn is very typical in describing very, very deep, dark emotional disturbance and challenges emotionally within your own self. Certainly depression is a very typical experience. Feeling emotionally deprived or disconnected, having issues, challenges, experiences of feeling disconnected from mother. Could be your own mother or a mother figure in your life. It can also be women, females in your life, because the Moon is the feminine symbol period. It's also the symbol of mother. So just the feminine in the various facets that she is expressed. But certainly to begin with, it's our own internal emotional sense of security that feels quite threatened when Saturn comes along and squares the Moon. So it can be a time of withdrawal, a time of feeling, like you're basically withdrawing from the world, and those around you emotionally. Again, vitamin B6 can be really helpful, because, a depressed mood, because we're talking about the Moon here, is very much connected to what's going on in our brain as well. So, things that can help uplift your mood there's so many different ways of doing that, and obviously I don't know what suits you. That's something you need to discover yourself. But whatever you can do to raise your mood and that can help you feel a sense of emotional security is really, really important during a Moon square Saturn period. But don't be surprised if there's some issues with mother and women in your life. Even if there's some kind of separation that occurs, some kind of loss, it can be very typical as well. It's not a pleasant transit, it's not easy, it's really tough. So I feel for you if you are going through this. I have been through this myself, and I know what it feels like. It's really, really tough. So just try and be aware that it will pass, just like the Sun square Saturn is going to pass, just like any transit will pass. But the point is, what does it bring up while it's there, present, active in your life? And how can you best try and utilize the energy to try and grow from it? I wouldn't suggest with Saturn transits that you're not going to feel a burst of energy and enthusiasm to run out there and take tasks head on and feel this sense of confidence. It's nothing like that. That's a Jupiter transit. Saturn transit is limitations, restrictions, boundaries, feeling blocked, feeling isolated, feeling lonely, not feeling understood. In the case of Saturn square Moon, there's a sense of feeling not emotionally understood or heard. That could even be by your partner in a relationship, you know. So there's various ways it can manifest. Even though we feel it's other people doing this to us, in a sense, it's not other people doing this to us. It is what we are projecting onto the relationship and the environment based on externalizing this Saturn transit, which has got to do with, as I said at the beginning, the reality that we have constructed in our own consciousness. So again, with the Moon square Saturn on a positive level, it is actually it can be an opportunity to deconstruct old emotional habitual patterns that have held you back, or that are not allowing you to continue to grow. You know, we all have a habitual, instinctual component to our being. So we all have various habits and conditioning. Saturn is very much about conditioning. And the Moon is also about conditioning as well. So if we bring Saturn and Moon together, what are our conditioned emotional reactions and responses to our life and to the life that we see, that we view out there? So this can be a time where some deconstruction, reconstruction, letting go, loss, change, adjustment of our own emotional nature and attitude about ourselves and life. That's not easy, is it? You know, I can say that in a few sentences in terms of what it means, but how challenging is that to go through? It's extremely challenging. It's emotionally a very dark time. So that's why I said before, do whatever you can that you know is going to help you feel an extra sense of support or an extra sense of security during this time, because you need it. It feels like those things are absent. So you need to try and bring that back in as best you can. But you can always empower yourself as well, which is actually even more important, by walking, earthing, grounding yourself, self-care, self-nurturance, self-love. This is going to be really primal and crucial during this time, because that's going to be the very thing that's going to feel like it's lacking in your life. Okay, so anyway, look, it's an emotionally tough and challenging year to go through. And I say year because if you've got Saturn squaring your Moon, it'll be a 1 year transit typically. Okay, sometimes it can be longer, but generally it's 1 year. So it's not an easy thing to experience. Okay, and there's a sense of feeling emotionally blocked. So you feel a whole bunch of very, really intense, deep feelings, but you struggle to express those emotions and those feelings. That's a classic Moon square Saturn. There's some kind of, remember, Saturn is depression, suppression, oppression. Is that it? Depression, suppression, oppression, suppression. Did I say that? Yeah. All the pressions. I've said that before in another video, because it's 100% true, and it's actually not a laughing matter at all. It's actually quite a harsh transition to go through in life. Okay, but we all go through it at some stage.